Hi, my name is Didier. Welcome to the lab. We're in Paris over at La Maison du Whisky, and today we're going to talk about Calvados, and more specifically Calvados Donfrontais. So for that, we've got Guillaume Drouin with us. Hi, Guillaume. How are you doing?
Hi Didier, I'm doing fine, thank you. It's good to see you.
And so let's find out more about Calvados Donfrontais. There are three specific Calvados appellations. Most people don't know that. There's the Pays d'Auge, the Classic, and the Donfrontais, which we're going to talk about today. Actually, I think Guillaume, your father was involved in the creation of this appellation. Could you tell us a little bit more about that history and what the main differences are between the three appellations, please?
So the history of the Calvados Donfrontais is very interesting history. It was actually first mentioned, this appellation was first mentioned in 1942 when the Calvados Pays d'Auge appellation was founded. At the same period, there were appellations d'origine réglementée, which were created for many small areas in Normandy. One of them was for the Donfrontais Calvados. So in the 40s, there was already an appellation d'origine réglementée for Calvados Donfrontais. But then later on, in the 80s, this appellation actually disappeared and it was merged in the Calvados AOC appellation, so in the generic appellation. Now, in the 90s, there was Jean Pinchon. He was the president of INAO, the French Institute for Appellation. And Jean Pinchon was from Normandy. He was a big fan and lover of Calvados. And he particularly liked the Donfrontais appellation. And it was one of his ambitions, actually, to create again the Donfrontais appellation. There was in Donfront a nice cellar which was actually the biggest production site in this region. This cellar was actually about to close. So when Jean Pinchon realized that the cellar, the Chai du Verger Normand, was about to close, he thought that the appellation will never come out. And so at that time, so it was just the beginning of the 90s, he went to see my father, who was working in the Pays d'Auge region, and told him, Christian, there's a very interesting cellar in Donfront. There's a beautiful stock of very interesting Calvados there. They have a particular style because they come from this region, in the south of Normandy, where the Calvados is made with more pear than apples. And I think, you should go and meet the people there because maybe there's something you could do with them. And so that's what my father did, and he was charmed by the region, by the style of the Calvados, by the history of that cellar, which is a crazy history, and link it to all the illegal production of Calvados in the region. And so my father decided that he would try to associate with the cellar and help the cellar to come back to a better economical situation. And so that's what we did in the 90s. And then Jean Pinchon's idea, as you understood, was to create again the Donfrontais appellation. So while my father took the activity of the cellar again, while Jean Pinchon was actively working with Louis de Lauriston, who was the founder of that cellar created in the 60s, to recreate the Donfrontais appellation. And then finally, in 1997, the Donfrontais appellation was recognized again as an AOC. So now in Normandy you have actually three different appellations for Calvados. The oldest one is Calvados Pays d'Auge. You have the appellation Calvados, which is a generic appellation which covers quite a large area in Normandy and a lot of different style of Calvados. In the Calvados appellation, one can use either apple or pear, can do a single or a double distillation, and you will find many different terroirs and climate under the Calvados appellation. And then you have two appellations which are much more specific. You have the Pays d'Auge appellation, where the Calvados is made with a big majority of apples, I would say usually about 95 to 100% of apples, and a double distillation and pot stills. And the Donfrontais appellation, which is a small production. It's something very interesting to realize. The Donfrontais appellation is a very limited production, something like 2% only of the total Calvados production. And in this area, Calvados is made with a minimum of 30% of pears and a single distillation mandatory in a column still. The underground is also interesting because it's made of granite, and this brings some minerality to the Calvados style, I believe.
Right, so most people know that Calvados is made of apples, but many are surprised to learn that there are also pears used for making Calvados. What does that bring to the blends, for example, flavor-wise, structure-wise?
So that is an interesting question. What does the pear give to Calvados? Well, first of all, what you should realize is that the pears used in Normandy are small fruits. You know, they're about that big, and they are both very astringent and acid at the same time. So you know, when you eat one of these pear, you will probably remember that for the rest of your life, because it's so surprising as it is so astringent and acid. So these fruits actually bring freshness to the Calvados. They bring acidity, they bring freshness, they bring a lot of fruit flavor. I think they make the Calvados also lighter in a way. I remember Jean Pinchon used to say that the pear was giving a backbone to the Calvados because of this acidity and this straightforward character that the pears bring. So it's a very interesting fruit, and you know, in Domfront, people actually use more pear than apples. There are more pear trees planted than apples, and these pear trees are very impressive trees. They're like 30 meters high for the biggest, or probably at least 20-25 meters for most of them, and the pear trees can last for more than 300 years. People in Domfront region say 100 years to grow, 100 years to produce, and 100 years to die. That's the life of a pear tree in Domfront.
Okay, and what about the distillation in columns for Domfrontais as opposed to the alambics for Calvados? What's the different flavors that that's going to bring?
So about the column distillation, well, the single distillation, which is made in the column still, is something very interesting. It brings, for me, I think, a very straightforward character to the Calvados. The double distillation tends to make Calvados rounder and smoother, whereas the column still makes a more vertical, straightforward style. And I think the column distillation gives a very good picture of the raw material, which means that you directly have a very good picture of the quality of your cider from the column distillation, whereas the double distillation tends to correct a little more, I think, the style of your cider. So both distillations are very interesting, but they bring different style to the different appellations we have in Normandy.
Okay, and finally, I want to just mention this new 100% pear Calvados Domfrontais in your range, the Calvados Comte Louis de Lauriston. How do you describe it to people? You know, 100% poire, that's kind of a rare Calvados to find. What does it taste like? How would you describe it? Okay,
so this 100% pear Calvados is something very rare and original. It's, I think, a very good example of the style of a good Domfrontais Calvados. It's light, it's very delicate, it's very fruity at the same time, and so it's a beautiful Calvados with this very fruity and delicate style that is typical from the Domfrontais region. I think, you know, you can enjoy these with a good dessert like an apple pie, but it's also a light Calvados that is perfect for an aperitif.
Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot, Guillaume.
Thank you very much, and I wish you all a good day.
Thank you at home for watching us. If you like what you see, give it a thumbs up. Follow us for more. And the question for the comments today is actually in Normandy, where the Calvados is made, what do the locals call the Champagne Normand, the local champagne? So if you think you know, put it in the comments, and we'll see you next time.